In this lesson, you'll learn about triads. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the root and quality of triads. Given any element of a triad and quality, you should be able to spell a triad. You should be able to identify and write triads using different voicings. And you should be able to label and spell triads using Roman numerals. Triads are the fundamental harmonic unit in most Western music. They consist of 3 notes, a root, third, and fifth, and they can be written as a stack of thirds. Throughout the lecture, I will distinguish between triads and chords. A triad is a 3-note chord. All triads are chords. Not all chords are triads, though. A chord can have 4 or 6 or 10 notes or whatever. On the staff, I've written a C major triad in treble clef. It consists of a stack of thirds, C, E, and G. You'll notice that it's written on 3 adjacent lines of the staff, and I've identified the root, C, the third, E, and the fifth, G, of the triad. When we name triads, we do so by indicating the root, which is the lowest sounding note when it's written as a stack of thirds, and the quality, which is determined by the intervals above the root. A C major triad, like we just saw, is a major triad with C as its root. An F sharp minor triad is a minor triad with F sharp as its root. To determine the quality of a triad, we need to consider the intervals above the root. A major triad, illustrated here, has a major third above the root and a perfect fifth above the root. From the third to the fifth, we have a minor third. So C to E is a major third, C to G is a perfect fifth, and E to G is a minor third. Much like we did with intervals, I've built triads on each scale step of the C major scale, and I've labeled them according to quality. Triads built on scale degrees 2, 3, and 6 are minor. They have a minor third and a perfect fifth above the root. The triad built on scale degree 7 is diminished because it has a minor third and a diminished fifth above the root. Triads built on 1, 4, and 5 are all major. The C major scale contains 3 major triads, 3 minor triads, and 1 diminished triad, and this is true of any major scale. Again, as with the intervals, I encourage you to memorize these 3-note groups by quality. You can spell any possible triad using these 3-note groups, and I'll show you how to do this momentarily. That is, memorize CEG, FAC, and GBD as major triads, memorize DFA, EGB, ACE as minor triads, and memorize BDF as a diminished triad. We can refer to triads in any key with respect to the scale degree on which they're built using a system of Roman numerals. A triad built on scale degree 1 gets capital Roman numeral 1. The numeral corresponds to the scale degree. The fact that it's a Roman numeral tells me I'm talking about a triad. And the fact that it's uppercase indicates that I'm talking about a major triad. Lowercase Roman numerals apply to minor triads, and the diminished triad is written with a lowercase numeral and a little degree sign in the upper right. To be clear, C major chords only get Roman numeral 1 when we're in the key of C major. In G major, we would label a C major triad with a capital Roman numeral 4 because it's built on scale degree 4 of that key. In F major, we would label a C major triad with a capital Roman numeral 5 because it's built on scale degree 5 of that key. Minor keys are a bit trickier in this regard. You'll notice that the triads built on 1 and 4 are minor. Triads built on 3, 5, and 6 are major. 2 is a diminished triad, and 7 can vary between major and diminished. Our rule of thumb will be to always raise the leading tone in minor keys unless you're directed to otherwise. So the 5 chord is always going to be major because it has the raised leading tone. The 7 chord is always going to be diminished because it has the raised leading tone unless I tell you otherwise. I'm going to take you through a few examples that show you how you can use the 3-note groups to spell any triad. Let's start with an A major triad. I already know the desired root and quality of the triad based on this information. ACE is the three-note group that has A in the root, and I know that it happens to be a minor triad. To change it into a major triad, I need to maintain the perfect fifth above the root and make the minor third into a major third. If I raise the C to a C sharp, that produces a major third above the root and preserves the perfect fifth above the root. I can't change it to a D flat because that would change the three-note group. Any triad is going to contain those three pitches. Here's a more difficult example. Let's say I want to spell an E flat diminished triad. Well, EGB is the three-note group that has E as the root, and it's a minor triad. The first thing I need to do is lower the E to an E flat so that I have the correct root. Incidentally, when I do this, the result is an augmented triad, which consists of a stack of major thirds bounded by an augmented fifth. Augmented triads are relatively rare, but they do exist, and so you might take a note of it. We won't encounter them often because they don't occur in the major or minor scale. To get the minor third above the root, I need to lower the G to a G flat. I still have an augmented fifth above the root, however. To get from an augmented fifth to a diminished fifth, I need to lower the fifth by 2 semitones to B double flat. E flat, G flat, B double flat spell a diminished triad with E flat as the root. Here's one more tricky example, and that is spelling a major triad whose third is F. Well, I know that DFA is the three-note group that has F as the third. Some people might suggest that simply raising the F to the F sharp would provide a solution. However, the question asks for a major triad whose root is F, not F sharp. In exercises like this, when you're given a specific note, you can never change that note. As one of my colleagues likes to say, it's equivalent to saying, I can't tell you what 2 plus 2 is, but I do know the answer to 2 plus 1. If I lower the D to D flat, I get a major third above the root that I need. Notice the result here is another augmented triad, a major third from D flat to F and a major third from F to A. Lowering the A flat creates a perfect fifth above the root and gives me the D flat major triad, which is the correct answer to the question. You'll also encounter instances where you'll need to spell a triad given only the Roman numeral and the key. For example, if I ask you to spell a 5 chord in B flat major, the first thing you'll need to do is figure out what note is scale degree 5 in that key. The capital Roman numeral tells you the triad is going to be major. Well, F is scale degree 5 in B flat major, and FAC is the three-note group with F as the root. It also happens to be a major triad, so your work is done. Now, life would be easy if triads always occurred as a stack of thirds, but this isn't the case. Sometimes they appear in different voicings, which is to say the individual elements of the triad appear in different places in the staff, sometimes in order, sometimes not in order. Looking from left to right, we see a bunch of G major triads. The first one here is in what we call close position. That is to say, it's written as a stack of thirds, and you can't fit any other chord elements in between these. The triad in the second measure is written in what we call open position. That is to say, the thirds are written as tenths, and if I wanted to, I could put in other elements of the chords in between what I have written here. I could add a G here, I could add a B here, I could add a D here. By definition, a chord is written in open position when you can fit another element of the chord between two of the voices. And when we talk about open position, we're only referring to the upper voices. The bass isn't figured into these calculations, so open position applies only between these two voices, or in the case of this one, between these upper 3 voices. This third chord is also in open position because I can put a G in here, I can put a B in there. That makes it open position. You'll also notice that it consists of 4 notes. There are 2 G's, a D, and a B. We say that the G is doubled, and this is actually pretty common practice to reinforce the strength of the root, because we always want that root to define the triad. In the 4th measure, we see upper voices in close position. And if we look at the whole measure together, we see that it contains a G major triad. The last 2 measures feature a G major triad presented melodically. All of these are written harmonically, just as we talked about with intervals, and this is melodic, which is to say it unfolds in time. So just like intervals, we can talk about melodic and harmonic triads. Here are a few examples of triads in actual music. With each example, I would encourage you to pause the video and find a recording on YouTube or use the library streaming site so that you can hear what this sounds like. This example is from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, and it's the first prelude from Book 1. This is the first 2 measures. I've circled some melodic presentations of triads in red. It may look like there are too many notes for a triad, but if we get rid of some of the duplicate letter names, we're left with only 3. We can then rearrange them, if need be, to correspond to one of our 3-note groups. In the first measure, we have a C major triad, and in the second measure, we have a D minor triad. We can also say that the first measure arpeggiates, that is, states melodically, the tonic triad, or Roman numeral 1, in C major, and that the second measure arpeggiates the 2 chord, the supertonic. We can write these triads harmonically, too. This is sometimes useful for determining harmonies in a more complicated texture. And actually, when Bach wrote this piece, he only wrote the first few measures with the arpeggiations, and the rest of it he wrote as pairs of half notes, like this, with the understanding that whoever played it would continue to arpeggiate in the same fashion. This is the opening of the 6th prelude from Chopin's Opus 28. I've circled instances, both melodic and harmonic, of the B minor tonic triad. You'll notice that triads in the treble clef are written harmonically, that is to say, as a stack of notes, and triads in the bass are written melodically. We can also say that these first 4 measures all contain the tonic chord, the 1 chord, in B minor. Once again, I've rewritten the passage using just dotted half notes to clarify the harmonies and voicings. By now you should be able to identify the root and quality of triads. You should be able to spell a triad given any element of a triad and its quality. You should be able to identify and write triads in different voicings, and label and spell triads using Roman numerals. As usual, if you have any questions, please post them to the discussion board on Canvas, and feel free to answer questions posed by your classmates. I would also recommend you take the quiz before coming to class. That way you'll be able to unlock the next module, which is more on triads. Remember, you're allowed to use whatever materials you have available, but you must score 100%, and you can take it as often as you like.